this evening we're going to talk now about creating a powerful syllabus. So the syllabus is a document that we create every single semester for all of our different sections, right? Yeah. How many of you love this job to write in the syllabus? Oh, do we have to go to the agrees and the strongly disagrees? Okay, so this is a pretty big job. Every time I write my syllabus, my husband says to me, have you or have you not taught this course before? Yeah. He says, you are acting like you have never taught this course before. You're sitting there for hours and hours and hours. And that is what it takes, an enormous amount of time to really create a syllabus, even if you already have created a syllabus, because each semester is a new semester. And I don't know if you share my enthusiasm, but I always feel like every semester can be better than the last one. So there's always something I can learn from my experiences that I can shift, and then I always make some giant shifts, and then of course that results in a big change really from where I started. So let's talk a little bit about what we're going to do this evening. We're going to do three things. The first thing we're going to talk about very briefly is, why do we do this? You know, what is the purpose of the syllabus? What are we trying to accomplish? Next, I'm going to share some interesting research studies with you on the syllabus. And then we'll talk about practical applications, how we can use the syllabus, how we can take this research, put it into practice into our classes. So we will begin. What is the point of all of this? Why on earth do we create a syllabus? All right? Why? Let me ask you the question.
It's a kind of a roadmap to guide us and students.
So it's kind of a roadmap. It clarifies our expectations, right? It kind of just clarifies what it is that we're going to be doing together for the next 14, 15 weeks, right? That's a really important reason for writing a syllabus. Another reason might be, contract, legal contract, right? That's something actually, my next slide's going to actually list this, although I will tell you that a colleague of mine and I are writing a book on the syllabus, and she happens to have a legal background, and she says, Christine, guess what? It's not a legal contract. So we can kind of pretend it is, but it really, I think the point of the contract is that we're, I'm going to do this, you're going to do that, and this is how we get to the, end of the semester and what we're trying to accomplish. What's another key reason that we put this syllabus together? Oh, sorry, missed you.
I use the syllabus to probably every other class to make sure I'm on target, to make sure we keep, where we're supposed to be, and we've done the labs we're supposed to, to make sure, especially now in the winter, that if we have a snow day, how to juggle it so we can cover, or what to, so a review to kind of map, map our progress against.
Absolutely. The syllabus is an organizational tool, right? It really can kind of help organize ourselves. So here are a couple of different references that speak about the different purposes of the syllabi. You can see here, these are many of the things that you talked about, trying to make sure that we don't have any communication mishaps. We have that plan that you just kind of outlined for us. And I love that cognitive map, really. What's most important, it visually organizes the course for us. So these slides are actually already available on the website, but I will also add Teresa's slides to the website as well. And by the way, the website for the center is just njstudentsuccess.com. So njstudentsuccess.com. And if you go under, I actually archived it under a past event already just to be proactive. So if you go under past events, it'll be the one right on the top for teaching tips. So you can get access to that. So those are different purposes. Grunert and colleagues talked about it a little differently, but you can see that theirs is a little bit broader, their view of why we do the syllabus. And what I want to do with you this evening is I want to challenge you to even think beyond some of these and really think about how the syllabus can be a motivational tool. The syllabus could inspire and get students really excited about your content. In addition, I also want you to think about using the syllabus as a vehicle for course design, because if you're using it as this cognitive map, as your plan, kind of think about it in that way, it can help you craft and structure your class. That's why I get so engaged in the syllabus. It's not about necessarily what's on this page and what's on that page. It's really about what am I trying to accomplish, and that's what takes so long, and how can I best accomplish it. So when we think about this concept as with the syllabus being a course design tool, we don't have enough time this evening to really dive deep into this concept, but I wanted to kind of just get you excited about viewing the syllabus really in this way, because again, what is your primary goal? Well, hopefully you're communicating your expectations. Well, your primary expectation should be related to what are we doing together? What are we trying to accomplish? What are you going to get to walk out of this semester with after having participated in this class? What are you going to know? What are you going to think? What are you going to do? Then you have that pathway of how we're going to get there. What's the evidence that you're going to need to show me that you've accomplished those learning outcomes? The evidence, of course, is your assignments. It could be formal assignments. It can be informal assignments. It may be graded. It may not be graded along the way. But what evidence are you going to get? And then the last part that we really want to think about is the teaching. And that's where we always jump to. In fact, if you think about the course design model, most of us kind of use this coverage-based design. Sometimes we get tethered to our textbooks, and week 1 must be this topic, chapter 1's topic. Week 2 then becomes chapter 2's topic. And sometimes we get, really excited about activities like, I gotta do this fun activity, I gotta figure out how I'm gonna get it in. But that's not the way we're supposed to structure our class. We should be focused on what we're trying to accomplish and how we can best get there. So the teaching methods really should come last. So what we're gonna do now is we're gonna shift gears a little bit, and we're gonna talk about the different elements of the syllabus, and I'm gonna interweave some of the research and practical strategies for you. So learning outcomes. Everyone agrees that that's an important part of the syllabus, correct? Woo, all right, I don't have to sell you on that. Awesome. All right, and learning outcomes really need to be front and center. Well, I have some terrible news for you, because research shows that students don't walk away knowing what the learning outcomes are of the class. So when I read this study is an oldie but goodie, I went like this. I can't believe it. They don't know? Look at how many students couldn't name the objectives. Almost 30% couldn't name a single one. 1 out of 3 students couldn't name an objective. Well, that conversation we were having earlier about it's in the syllabus? Do you think the learning outcomes are in the syllabus? I think they mostly are. I mean, it's really bad if we forget to put them in there, but I think they are. But sometimes there's a whole lot of information in the syllabus. We talked about that legal contract kind of feel that it has, and oftentimes it can be buried in the syllabus. So just because it's in there doesn't mean that we have drawn students' attention to it. And for any of you, I'm just like you, and I get frustrated when students ask me over and over again questions about things that are in the syllabus. But put on a different hat for a minute. How many of you have been told, it's on the website? Yeah? It's there. Can you find it? Just because it's there doesn't mean you can put your fingers on it. And how quickly we give up when we get frustrated when we can't find something, right? So it's not just about making sure it's there, it's making sure it's accessible and visible, especially the critically important parts of the syllabus. So if we're going to talk about the learning outcomes as being a critical part, what are we doing to draw attention to it? So I'm not saying it's our responsibility only, but I am saying that we can take a little bit of action that might make it more likely for students to actually know about those learning outcomes. Clearly, that magic should happen in the classroom, not just on a paper document, but we can also do it visually on the syllabus. So I am embarrassed to tell you that this came from one of my syllabi a long, long time ago, and actually I couldn't even get them all on there. The list went on and on and on and on. I don't even remember how many outcomes I had. If you asked me to identify what those were and I was teaching the course, I probably couldn't do it. So instead of giving laundry lists of everything, I have shortened my list to, 3 to 5 learning outcomes, and I put this little note, important. I put bold, I put red, I do something to attract the students' attention to it so that they know this isn't part of the syllabus to skip to get to the assignments, but that this is really essential. So I am going to ask you to do a quick turn and talk at your table. I'm just going to give you about a minute or two because we're on a tight time frame here, but to quickly kind of dialogue about these questions and think about what you currently do or what you could be doing to draw attention to what's really important on your syllabus. So quick turn and talk. Okay, folks, I hate to do this because I hear some great conversations going on, but we are on a tight time schedule, so I'm going to pull you back together. And I'm actually not going to have us report back out on this, but I will pause for a moment if anyone has any questions for me or any general comments that they want to make. Alrighty, we'll move along. So the idea here is every time you give students a chance to process, you don't always have to do a report out. I think sometimes we feel compelled if we have them do a turn and talk that we have to always do a share, and we really don't always have to. You do want to monitor and make sure folks are on task and on target, and sometimes you should do report out, and sometimes you don't have to. Because we're on a tight time frame, we're not going to right now. So obviously, after you identify the learning outcomes and you emphasize those in some important way, then that's really when you dive into the evidence and the activities that will get you there. We don't have time today to dive deep into this area, but this is the part that you really want to focus on. However, I am going to draw your attention to a couple of general issues as you're designing your course. As you're thinking about what kinds of evidence you're looking for and what kinds of activities you want to use, I want to just kind of give you a couple things to think about. First of all, we need to hold students accountable for mastering the content. For years, I was teaching, and I would have on my syllabus, read chapter 5. And I would expect them to read chapter 5. And guess what? You mean it wasn't just me, thank God. I have really found that this to be the case. They weren't reading it. Well, guess what? I didn't really hold them accountable. I just wrote on the syllabus, read chapter 5, as if that was going to magically motivate them and make it happen. Most of my students were not reading the chapter. What I started to do is I started to spoon feed them. Here it comes. I'm bringing chapter 5. Open up, George. It's coming your way. Because you weren't reading it, I get to class and I discovered they didn't, so I had to then figure out what to do. And then all of a sudden I paused and I said, wait a minute, what has happened here? I have taken the bar and I have dropped it significantly down, and that is not okay. I'm like, whoa, I gotta stop, I gotta reflect, and I gotta restructure the way I do this. And actually, it was funny because my colleagues at Middlesex and I were doing a presentation at Lily's Teaching and Learning Conference on getting students to read the textbook. And I'm like, I gotta start doing some of this stuff if I'm gonna present on it. And it was like magic. When I tell you my students read the textbook, I am not kidding. They read the textbook. Why? I started to hold them accountable. I gave them reading assignments. I gave them quizzes. I held them accountable. I showed them that it mattered. The syllabus became an opportunity for me to highlight to them what matters. And I started giving them not gigantic grades. They were soft little small grades, but enough to make them motivated to do it. And I also started to expect it. You talked about expectations. I'm a very high expectation kind of gal, but I noticed that my expectations had slipped. I had to reset, recharge, get back on track. So one of the things that you could do is figure out how are you going to hold them accountable. A, communicate its importance, but B, how do you communicate that importance? And unfortunately, the way that it really works usually is with some kind of grade or some extrinsic motivator. Now, this is one of my favorite studies by Rodiger and Karpik, and for those of you who know about this, you'll just have to forgive me. I'm going to go over it one more time. But for those of you who haven't heard about this study, it's a really powerful study. So when I walked into teaching, I had a midterm and a final, right? I did not use quizzes. Why? Well, there were a couple of reasons for that. A, my experience as a student was primarily midterms and finals, so I'm just kind of, okay, that's what they did, that's what I'm going to do. You know, that's kind of the way it always was. Why? Because God knows it's a lot of work to create a lot of quizzes, right? Let's be honest, folks. And I had enough to do. You know, I was teaching part-time on top of a full-time job. I didn't have enough hours in the day to do all this stuff. Ugh, like a lot of work, right? Why? I didn't want students to feel like it was high school. You know, I wanted them to feel like it's college with meaty midterms and meaty finals, and these things really matter. Well, I was totally wrong, okay? That is not the right approach, and actually it gets me so frustrated when I hear college students talking about my grade is based on 2 exams. You know, like it shouldn't be. I mean, there are so many things that we are trying to accomplish that there are many different ways for them to show that, but we should be building in some formative assessments, even if they're small parts of the grade. You know, I'm not saying make it a huge part, because you know what, that final exam, especially in something like nursing, clearly I want my nurses to know what they're doing, right? I definitely want them to know what they're doing, but what the research shows is that testing is not just a way to show what you know, testing is a way to learn. So here's this study by Rodiger and Karpak. What they did is they broke students up into 3 groups. One group was called the study group. They were given content to learn, and they studied that content 4 times, okay? The second group was the study test group. They were given that same content to learn 3 times, and then the last time they had to recall what they learned. The very last group got the material 1 time, and then they had to recall the information 3 times. Now, what you see here in this chart, if you look at the immediate recall, the group that did the best was the study group. This is so awful, folks, because this shows us cramming works for a couple of minutes. So when your students say cramming works for me, it could work for them for today. But if we need them to hold on to that content and actually apply it in their jobs and in their future classes and in life, this is not what we're going after here, folks. We're going after holding on to it, and I forget if this was 10, 12, 14 days now. I'm getting it mixed up because there's so many different studies on this topic. This is a very consistent finding, by the way. But look at what happens here. When you look at the delayed recall, the exact opposite happens, and here's the most fascinating part. The group that had the content only 1/4 of the time actually did the best because they got to retrieve and practice retrieving that information 3 times. So why am I bringing this research up on a workshop about the syllabus? Because if you take this research and you apply it, you want to build in retrieval opportunities into your class. Quizzes are obviously one way to do that, but they're not the only way. You can think about the teaching activities that you structure in. There's so many different ways for you to engage students in that recall of content. How are you asking them to do that? Are you holding them accountable for that? That is critical as you design the learning activities and the evidence that you're going to be looking for. So testing is a powerful memory tool. Testing is a powerful? One more time. Testing is a powerful? Memory tool. All right. See, if you keep saying it 3 times, you'll remember. All right. Now, the other thing that I like to remind folks of is the importance of feedback. We all know how valuable feedback is, right? So I came across this really interesting article by Taras, and I was sitting there one day, as I often do, reading a journal article at breakfast, and I was like, oh my God, I can't believe I haven't thought about this before. So this article, Taras, just got me thinking. Basically, the article was about, we have an equity problem in the world. Well, you're probably saying, Christine, did you not know that? Because I know that part. I know we have lots of equity problems in the world. But the equity problem that Taras talked about was not an equity problem that I had really thought about. He basically said, we treat all undergraduates unfairly. We don't treat undergraduates equally to graduates, professionals, and others. And here's what he meant by that. If you read the article, he talks about feedback. He says most undergraduate courses, you get 1 opportunity and only one opportunity to show what you know. And then we'll give you feedback on your paper, your presentation, your final exam, whatever it might be, but you are not given an opportunity to then apply that feedback and redo it. Now, English classes are a different example. You know, you have drafts and different things. So some disciplines, obviously, it is a little bit different. But when he looks at the overall picture, he says, generally speaking, it's a once and done in the undergrad world. Well, why is that the case? Because there's a lot of undergraduate students, and can you imagine after grading all those papers doing it again next week? No, I don't like doing it the first time, then I'd have to do it all over again? Ay, 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 right? But what he says is, think about this. You submit a professional article for a journal, guess what happens? You get quite a bit of feedback, and you often get a chance to edit, revise, and resubmit. And guess what? You're here in terms of your knowledge and your learning. You know, you need feedback too. We all do. We all benefit from it. But who needs feedback the most? People who are on the, upper, kind of strategy, right? They're on the lower end of the curve trying to get up there. So what basically Tara says is we need to really increase feedback opportunities to students. So although I don't have time today to talk about a million strategies, I'm just going to share one or two strategies with you, and then we're going to shift gears to talk about some other elements of the syllabus. One way that I did this is through linked assignments, because I was not going to go and sit through all these papers all over again. So in my classes, I would often have some kind of paper, some kind of presentation, and in many cases, they were on different topics. Well, now what I do is I link them to the same topic. So now they get feedback on the paper that they can then use that feedback and apply it before they give the presentation. So you see how you can build in some of that. I also have built in a lot more in-class time to give feedback, because verbal feedback is so much more powerful than when we're writing on, we don't even know if they're reading what we're writing, right? We pour our hearts and souls, we give up our precious family time, we are, just every night, weekend, grading, and we don't even know whether students are getting it. So I started using in-class time for feedback, having students work on projects, bring things in, and then I'd be looking at it, and I'd give them feedback, and I'd get to see whether they understood what I was saying. They had an opportunity to clarify, and it's real time and it's fast. So I have started to do that in class by really giving more opportunities using class time, because again, if it matters, it's worthy of class time, right? And I think that feedback really matters. So just a couple of things to think about as you're crafting your syllabus. How might you increase the accountability? How might you increase your feedback opportunities to students? Are there opportunities to link? Might you ask for rough drafts? Could you take some lessons learned from the English faculty? Where can we kind of go to really help students benefit from feedback opportunities? Okay, I'm going to pause again. Any comments, questions, or reactions? Yes.
I work in the financial service industry on the IT side, and one thing I learned coming out of college is exactly what you're saying. We got taught something, and then we walked away without necessarily applying the feedback. Now, when we work on projects, you find you do your draft, and then people look at it, come back tomorrow and look at it, and you have to do something again to improve it, come back again, and it takes weeks and months as you refine the final product. And knowledge becomes deeper as you do that, as opposed to just writing. Even if just writing a business case, you write a business case and it looks good, but if somebody else looks at it, come back again and say, okay, did you apply this filter to look at it? So that just gave me an eye-opener now.
Great. So it seems like it resonates with you. I mean, again, in the professional world, we have many more opportunities for feedback. Not always, but we often do get to learn from feedback as professionals. Okay, we're gonna skip that one just to keep on track. So the next thing I want to talk to you about is a couple of different research studies and how we can apply them. So this first one, what's in the syllabus? So, Doolittle looked at this and said, well, I'm going to go and investigate syllabi. So here's what he did. He looked at 15 different teaching resources and discovered all these things that experts said should be in the syllabus. Then he looked and he identified what sources were actually there. So we take a look, he was able to identify 4 major themes that these experts identified as being important to be in the syllabus: course information, instructor information, grading information, and policies. Then he went out to good old Google and he found 1,000 syllabi and he looked to see, did these syllabi have those different kinds of elements in it? So I'm going to ask you to do a quick prediction. You're going to turn to a neighbor and you're going to guess what percentage of those syllabi had these kinds of information points on them. So quick turn and talk, make a prediction, and then I'll go ahead and share with you in a moment the results. All right, folks, I am going to bring you back together. I'm going to do a quick timeout for process. This is a strategy I often use with my students. I will use predictive activities. How many of you would like to know the answer to the question? Anybody interested? All right, usually. How many of you would like your students to be interested in what you have to say next? Woohoo, right? I'm getting worried, if the hands don't go up. So what I do is I often do prediction exercises to get them more engaged. Instead, I could have just told you, and by the way, do little found, X percentage, put this information and X percentage, put that. But by just giving a brief pause, it may have been only a minute and a half or 2 minutes that I gave you to think about it, you are now much more engaged and interested in what I have to say next. So I will reveal the results for you and I'll let you take a peek. So it looks like some of you may not have been exactly on the money. It seems like some of you had, ooh, that was shocking, either higher or lower. The idea here is that we obviously want to include all of this information, but I do want to make a comment about the way in which we talk about our policies. Because syllabi have become, as we said before, like these long legalese kinds of documents. And it seems to me when I meet faculty and they get really frustrated with something a student did, they create another policy and they throw it in the syllabus so it doesn't happen again. That's it, I'm putting it in the syllabus. It's in the syllabus. Here it is. This is not going to happen to me yet again. Well, the truth of the matter is we should not be making these big giant policies and using an enormous amount of space on our precious syllabi to focus on maybe what one student did. We need to instead focus on what most students do. And most students are generally, most students generally want to do their best. I believe really in our students, and I think that's important that you believe in your students as well. And I don't want to go down that whole late work missed policy, but I do think it's important to just say a couple of things about that. When I first started teaching, I was told by someone to write on my syllabus, no makeup exams allowed, in capital letters and exclamation points. I was like, oh, and I didn't know what I was doing, so I'm like, okay. So I put that down. What do you think happened to me that semester? Did anybody come up to me and ask for an exception? Yes. Yes, you're correct. And now what am I supposed to do? I'm like, so I'm sitting there, new faculty member, not knowing how to handle this. I wrote it in capitals. Did they not see it? It had 3 exclamation points, and yet they're still asking me for an exception. So what did I do? I gave it to them. She knows me. she's like, I know she's going to give it to them. I'm like, it was a real situation that this student had. It was valid. These people are humans. We aren't teaching psychology. We're teaching students who have lives and things happen. So I gave them an exception. And then somebody else, and then I gave them an exception. But here's the problem with that kind of policy. Well, from a cultural perspective, not everyone is going to think it's okay to ask for an exception to that policy, right? So I have really created a situation, another equity problem really in my class. Because if I have a really persistent student who's going to challenge me on that, I'm very likely to give them an extension or exception to the rule. But if I have the law-abiding citizen who's not willing to challenge, I'm not going to do that because I don't even know that it exists. They haven't brought it to my attention. So Why was I writing no makeup policy with, capital letters and 3 exclamation points when it wasn't real? It wasn't a real policy. And that's not the policy. The policy is just talk to me and we'll figure it out. I wasn't granting it willy-nilly, like, hey, I overslept today and I, didn't do my homework. No, but, you had a real issue. I'm a human being and you're a human being. I'm going to connect with you on that level. And again, I think that matters much more so than, whatever the assignment was. If you got like real stuff going on, that matters. So instead now I have really changed my policy to be more reflective of what it really is. And I tell them it's extremely important to be timely and follow these protocols. But if something happens in your life, I want you to let me know, and then we'll talk about it. There's no promises attached with it, but it's an open invitation for a conversation. So then that's a much more fair way to do the policy. So I just wanted to mention that in terms of what we had talked about before about policies. You want to make sure policies are there, but you want to make sure they're real, valid, meaningful, and fair, and equitable. So reaching out for help. We want students to come to us if they're struggling. Yes? Yes. Okay, well, good news here. This study had this very cool, I love it, cool strategy here. They gave 2 syllabi that were exactly the same with the exception of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 words. One syllabus had, please come and talk to me, and the other did not. In every other way, the syllabus was exactly the same. They asked these students, how likely would it be for you to seek help from the instructor? Take a look at the findings. The supportive one is obviously the one that had those 6 extra words. Now, if that's not a takeaway for you, 6 words, go put them on your syllabus. Please come and talk to me. That is pretty powerful, right? So we can make a difference with the syllabus. We can motivate and inspire students to take advantage of resources, including us. So by adding that syllabus, putting maybe a personal kind of touch on the front page, that you're supporting them. You see on the very top, please reach out to me. I went with that a phrase instead of please come and talk to me. Whatever you want, but something that encourages them to do that. What about also listing and making it very easy for students to find the resources that are available on your campus? Yourself and others. What about doing that? I didn't do that for a really long time. And I've had several students say, wow, that was really helpful, because I didn't have to go say it's on the website and they have to go hunt for it, right? But it was kind of front and center, boxed up in a nice, way on the syllabus. Really a way to, again, help students access those resources that we need them to access. All right, how long should a syllabus be? This is a quick activity. If you think a syllabus should be 2 pages or less, you stay seated. If you think a syllabus should be 3 to 6 pages, stand up. If you think a syllabus should be 7 or more pages, stand up with your arms raised. It's like the wave. So, are there really all the rest of you are saying 0 to 2 if you're sitting down? 0 to 2. Okay, I'm just making sure you're not being rebels on me and you're actually representing what you're saying. Okay. She's like, I'm holding up the numbers. I'm stopping at 6. All right, you guys can sit down. So this has always been something I've been interested in, is how long should this syllabus really be? Well, there's some research studies out there on this very issue. And in this particular issue, they looked at a brief syllabus and a detailed syllabus. Here's what their definition was. They went with 2 and a 6-page syllabus. Basically, it had all the same content, but it provided more detail. So instead of saying you have a test, it told you a little bit about the nature of the test. Those kinds of differentiations. So 2 versus 6 pages. And here is what the findings showed, that in all cases, the detailed syllabus really had better reactions from the students. So they preferred the more detailed syllabus. All of those were significantly different. Now, I have a syllabus that's longer than 6 pages, so I was like, that's interesting. Oh, wait, let me tell you one more thing. They also, the folks who looked at the detailed syllabus said they would be more likely to recommend that course, and they would be more likely to take another course with that professor. So the detailed syllabus had a more positive reaction by students, okay? Now, I told you I have a longer syllabus, so I was a little bit more interested in knowing what if we went to 9, or what if we went to 15, which was mine. I was like 15. So a colleague of mine here at Middlesex, Crystal Coolin, and I did the research study here with Middlesex students, and it was published in, Scholarship of Teaching and Learning. So this study you can find online in the library databases. But we looked at 6, 9, and 15 pages to see if we start getting really crazy, like you wavy folks out there, is that good, bad? What is it? Let's take a look at what the data says. So the medium syllabus, which was 9 in this study, had the best overall impression, okay? So medium syllabus had the best overall impression from the students. But here's some additional, higher overall impression of the professor, so not just of the course, but also the professor. But here's some other interesting findings that seem to be true, whether it was medium or long, but not short. Now remember, in this case, short was 6. So when we looked at the 3 different groups, and it was like an experimental design where they were randomly assigned to different syllabi, the longer syllabi, whether it was either the 9 or the 15 page, really had a better reaction for students. They thought that the professor cared more, that the professor was more motivated and more helpful. So the short one, not so much, the longer one. So it kind of communicates that you care about your students. Now, if what we did is we asked students also, would you prefer to have a syllabus that has most of what you need and then later get like all your assignment details and things of that nature, through like your Blackboard, your Canvas, learning management system, or would you prefer to get everything packaged all together? And what you can see here is that most of the students said, no, we want to package it all together. And this is exactly the reason for this is because, again, in your learning management system, I always had everything, and I would get all these questions. Where's the rubric for this? Where's the information on this assignment? And I would say, instead of it's in the syllabus, it's in the LMS, but again, the LMS, you can be hidden, there's a lot of layers there. So I started to put it all in the syllabus, and I put a table of contents on my syllabus. It's almost like a little mini manual, I'm not expecting them to memorize. I'm not even expecting them to read it all at once. I'm expecting them to use it like a resource. Use it when you need it and refer to the parts that you need to. So pages 9 and 10 about this assignment are not for day 1, but maybe by week 3 we need to start paying attention to that. And I will bring attention to that in class. I will actually say to you, open up your syllabus and I want you to look at page 9 and 10. That is the rubric and the details about this upcoming assignment. You're going to now have a quick discussion about it and generate a question for me. And then I'll answer any questions that you have. Now I know they're really looking and using their syllabus to make sure that they know what they need to do. So I was pleasantly surprised to know that I wasn't just delirious that this was a good idea, that most of the students also agreed. So the idea here is we want to apply what we're learning by really maybe adding some specific information. We don't have to be afraid of having a syllabus that's too long. We can include some other really powerful things. So if you can bear with me for just a couple more minutes, I want to share just a few more studies with you and some ideas. So think about adding images. If you're not constrained to having it be a page or 2 pages or even 3 or 4 pages, think about how powerful it can be to have a really cool image on the front page of your syllabus. Again, evoking an emotional reaction, using the syllabus as a motivational tool. A colleague of mine showed me her before and after A&P syllabus. And oh my God, just the image of the skeleton thing, on the front page and the way that she packaged the front page of her syllabus, I had an emotional reaction of really being excited about, I think I would enjoy this class, The first one I was afraid. I didn't even know, I wasn't going near that one. But thinking about how an image can really make a difference. Some other things you can do if you don't have to worry about space is use pictures of textbooks, use color, use shading, boxes, graphs, charts. It doesn't have to be just this endless Word document, just words everywhere. Try to make it more appealing and organizationally, visual tools really help. You talked about organization before, so we can package that in this way. We could use graphs. I don't know how many of you have the same issue my students often struggle with, is how much does this count and why? I don't have to do that assignment. Well, what do you mean? Like, that's 20% of your grade. Do you know how that translates into the final grade? Well, the pie chart seems to help them a little bit more at seeing, like, this pie, this whole slice is missing if you don't do that. Oh, they kind of get it. So I've used some visual charts to kind of draw attention to some of those issues. And then adding details, as somebody mentioned before, you might want to consider putting the rubrics right in the back of the syllabus, almost like an appendix, and also adding rationale. Why are you asking them to complete that assignment? So the last study, actually, if we talk a little bit about what does the syllabus say about you, I'm going to ask you to just do a quick 10-second reflection. If your student was looking at your syllabus right now, what one word would they use to describe either you or the class? So think about that for 10 seconds. Now I'm going to pause and I'm going to say, is that the word you want? Because if it is, awesome. If it's not, make it happen. You got a week left, or a day, or like a couple of minutes, but you can change that word, right? You want their first impression of the course to be out of this world. So I have one last study to share with you, and this is by Harnish and Bridges, and what they did is they looked at the difference between a friendly and an unfriendly syllabus. So these students were actually told that they were evaluating an adjunct, and they had two different kinds of syllabi. Now, I'm going to show you the friendly versus unfriendly, and I'm going to tell you that I don't think the unfriendly is very unfriendly at all. In fact, I think it looked like my syllabus before. Take a minute to just go ahead and look at the difference. I mean, it's not evil, that's for sure. But you see the nuances, right? All right, so, and the results are? So I liked the first two with the friendly, but I got a little worried about the third one, because if you're becoming too friendly, does that mean you're communicating that the course isn't challenging? You have to walk this careful walk. And I have to tell you, I'm usually an optimist and I like to think the best, but I started to say, ooh, it caused me to pause and say, I'm not sure I want my students to think my course isn't difficult, because it is. And if they think it's not, their behaviors won't match what I need them to do. So I was like, I don't know, maybe I need to back off of this idea for a minute. And I will tell you, I did this presentation at a conference, and someone in the back of the room shot her hand up like I could not possibly ignore her. I had to answer, call on her. So I said, yes, miss, what? She says, there's another explanation for that, Christine. I said, okay. She says, maybe because of the way you package this, you gave them the feeling that they could do it. And that's why it seemed less difficult. Not necessarily that it was going to be easy, but that it was doable because you were there to help them. And obviously this wasn't my syllabus, but you get the idea. So I was like, Now the truth is, I don't know how to interpret that. I think we do have to be careful, but I just want to offer you those couple different ways of thinking about it. So I want to wrap up now with, applying that, using you instead of the student. I mean, it's a document for them, right? So why do we write students will be able to? Why don't you say, hey, you're going to be able to. I'm going to do this. Not the professor will do this. I'm going to do this. I happen to be a person. Like I'm right here. I'm going to tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to tell you what you're going to do. So making it more personal, some really simple changes can make a huge difference in your syllabus. So if you can't revise the whole course design part, you can add those 6 words. You can change the student to you and professor to I. There's a couple of small things that you can do. Add a photo, an image, a pie chart. I mean, those are all really manageable things you can do to try to shift the image and the motivational factor. So the last thing that I just want to end on is, how do we use this document? Well, the worst way to use your first class is to go over the syllabus. It's god awful. And I don't know why. Sometimes we do this. It's really funny how we are as faculty, because I think we've all been guilty of this. If I say it, then I'm covered, check. So if I said it out loud, they need to know all those policies, they will know all the rules, they will know everything that's expected because I said it and now they learned it. Well, no, it doesn't quite work that way, folks, right? So what you want to do is you want to think about different ways to really engage them with the syllabus, and it can't be just a first day of class activity. But the first day is a great way to start, and I'm going to borrow this from Christine Wathen, who gave me this idea of the jigsaw classroom. She really knocks it out of the park when she told me about this, and I can't tell you, this is my favorite first day of class activity now. I break students up. My syllabus is long enough to say you have page 1 to 2, you have 3 to 4, you have 5 to 6, you have 7 to 8, I can keep going. Or I can do like 1 to 5 if you want to chunk it into larger groups. And I have them identify, I give them very specific questions. What are the most important things on these couple of pages that you need to bring attention to your classmates? So you're bringing that, and then what is a question that you have about this content? So most important, and also a question. So that's a great way to do Jigsaw. And if you're not familiar with the Jigsaw classroom, you can Google it and find out more about it, or come and talk with me privately, because it's just too much to talk about in 5 minutes. So we won't be able to wrap up with that. But the other idea is that you want to use it throughout the semester. So as I said before, it's not just about saying, do you have your syllabus out? But let's use it. So today we're going to look at syllabus page and here's why, and how it relates to what we're doing. And then I really just make it a working, living document. So I really appreciate it. I know I went a little bit over, but I want to thank you all for your time and wish you all the best at creating a powerful syllabus. So thank you. Thanks.